And welcome back to Capitol Tonight one final time. Well, Governor-elect Andrew Cuomo weathered a lot of criticism throughout the campaign due to the lack of minority representation on the statewide Democratic ticket. Both Black and Latino leaders were actually quite unhappy with the party's all-white lineup, which included just one woman and two upstaters. So, hoping to calm these fears, Andrew Cuomo pledged to make his own administration one of the most diverse in New York's history. Now, with less than 1 month to go until he takes office, my next guest is trying to hold the governor-elect's feet to the fire, but his efforts have landed him in hot water with his own boss. Guillermo Martinez is the president of the Latino Society of New York. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Liz. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good to have you. So please tell us, this report is generally an overview. You pretty much actually released it at the end of November, but today there were press conferences simultaneously from New York City to Utica, all municipalities that have a pretty sizable Latino population.
Yes, yes. What we did was coordinate with areas in the state that have a sizable Hispanic population and emerging communities and surrounding areas to put out a set of ideas that we hope that the governor and the lieutenant governor would see fit to incorporate into quick state action when they take office.
Well, what's interesting to me, now you noted 81% of the votes cast by Latinos in this past election were in support of Andrew Cuomo.
That's
so
correct.
He has an incentive here, obviously. It is the fastest growing, I hate to say minority, because now it's the minority population. Most of what you focus on in these 12 proposals are about hiring in the administration, and you're saying don't just give us tokens, give us fully integrated, high-level positions throughout the government.
That's correct. We don't just want the hiring per se of a few people. We understand that there's many issues confronting our community that cannot be addressed unless policymakers at all levels of state government are sympathetic to the needs of our community and really understand what's taking place. We now have, the census is going to come out with some figures in a few weeks, well over 4 million New Yorkers who are Hispanic. As many as 1 in 5 New Yorkers will be Hispanic, and they're spread all over the state. So there's an incentive for us to present ideas for solutions, because they're really tied to the economic well-being of our state.
You know, this is actually a refrain that we've heard a lot, both nationally and in New York, that the Democratic Party perhaps has been not taking for granted in some ways the Latino voter and making a big push on both sides. Both Republicans and Democrats have been making pushes for Latino voters, in part because they tend to be socially conservative but fiscally liberal, if you will.
No, that's correct. I mean, we saw elections with Mayor Giuliani, Governor Pataki. They received a large percentage of the Latino vote. And then we saw just now, there's a lot of trust and optimism in the Cuomo-Duffy administration. Never before in the history of New York State politics have we seen a governor and a lieutenant governor that has long-standing relationships with the Latino community. Mayor Duffy in Rochester and Andrew Cuomo have long, decades of years of contact and working with Latino community. So we see great promise in their administration. These ideas are just a set of directions that we think will systematically increase our access and ability to solve some of our problems.
There are actually two proposals here that I found really interesting. The first is at-large elections, which I have to profess I had no idea were considered so discriminatory. Could you just briefly tell me why?
We have a system in the state of New York where we have municipalities that instead of holding district elections, they allow people in a specific geographic town or village to just run. So you could have three neighbors get together and say, we're going to run and control the town board, and they will just represent one block of the entire neighborhood. So the idea is that now that we have emerging Latino communities and minority communities throughout the state, this system is disenfranchising Hispanic voters, minority voters. In Portchester, the federal government just ruled last summer that their system was totally in violation of the Voting Rights Act, and it had to be redone because the majority of the town was Hispanic, but they could never elect a Hispanic town board member, village board member.
At large means that the entire community votes. There's no district at all in just one block. I get it.
Right.
So you'd like to do away with that all told?
We think that part of the recommendation is to have a commission to redraw political lines, which is great because I think it'll do away with some of the corruption that we see in government. That we also have to empower the average voter, and in these communities, doing away with that old system is important.
The other interesting proposal that you have that I suspect is probably going to be fairly controversial is using the proceeds from drilling in the Marcellus Shale to fund education.
Yeah, I think we reworded that. We should have been reworded. What we wanted to make sure is that we understand all the forces shaped in the state of New York. The potential drilling in the Marcellus Shale will bring in billions of dollars to the state of New York. SUNY Binghamton is sitting on millions and millions of dollars of potential royalties. We saw a proposal to empower SUNY, the SUNY Empowerment Act, which would allow campuses to decide what they want to do with their own land. If that had gone through the legislature, SUNY Binghamton could keep billions of dollars on its own campus. So the idea would be we're aware of what's going on. It doesn't mean we endorse the drilling. We're aware of the issues that are shaping New York.
Okay, so now we have to say that this report, which seems, sort of like a white paper and fairly innocuous on its face, has brought you some trouble. You are a longtime employee, almost a decade, of Assemblyman Peter Rivera, and before I've spoken to you, just got off the phone with him, he has informed me that he has fired you. Because of, he says, your failure to let him know that this event was going to be taking place, that this report was going to be taking place. And he basically says that it shows a complete, this is a quote, a complete lack of tact, a complete lack of foresight. He is my employee, and he knows that I've been working on these issues that he highlights, and he never gave me the heads up, and I was never consulted on this. He basically says that you've taken his work and usurped it, and he never intended this to be a Latino agenda. What's your response to that?
There's a public record to prove my contributions as a staff member for almost a decade in that office. When I came in, there's very few pieces of legislation, no real involvement in educating the broader community on the needs of the Latino community. Since I've been there, we've published over a dozen reports, 150 pieces of legislation, almost 50 chapter amendments, law that so I've done some good work. It's not. And not all of it has been his direction. It has been the real impetus of a good staff person. We have a good Albany staff, but not all these recommendations have been his legislation.
But did you give him adequate heads up? Did you tell him what you were doing?
He was given a draft without a full explanation of what I had drafted on my spare time. Again, this is all my community work, my community work. I'm very involved in my community. Been so for 20 years in the Capital Region. And then his assistant campaign manager was constantly fed everything that was going on.
He's involved in the transition. I mean, he's sitting on the Economic Development Committee for Andrew Cuomo and Bob Duffy's transition. Do you think that perhaps you should have gone through more channels that were appropriate or official?
No, again, from my point of view, we gave him a rough draft and to two of his staff in the city of Albany. in New York City. He has two lawyers on staff. They were given the document when they were here in Albany about 10 days ago. And then the information was conveyed through his campaign people. From my perspective, the community needs to make a stand because we don't know what's really being discussed behind closed doors. So we know these are simple recommendations, not really any fiscal impact to them. They could really show that the governor, the lieutenant governor, recognize our support for them.
So if this cost you your job, was it worth it?
I think in retrospect, you could say if I can't find a job 3 or 4 months from now, it's a horrible situation. I'm hoping that the governor's saying he's looking for talented people. I have a pretty good resume to show my talents, but I think that it's part of the badge we have to wear sometimes, the badge of courage, that we move our society forward. One step forward, 2 steps back. I think it was important to be said. This was not an antagonistic press conference attacking the governor or lieutenant governor. We think they're great friends of our community. I'm shocked to see his reaction to this.
Well, Guillermo Martinez, I want to thank you very much. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news to you, but thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.